All right, time now for the Fantasy Fix. It is brought to you today on the Sports Bash by the Piccolo Inn. Your best pick for South Jersey's best wings, Route 206 in Chemung, New Jersey. I'm Mike Gill. This is the Sports Bash live on 97.3 ESPN. Sky Guasco from the Candlestick Kids Fantasy Football Podcast on the Believe Podcast Network is back for another week. If you have questions for Sky, get them in now, 609-403-0973, 609-403-0973. That's the way to get involved. We'll get listener questions in just a second, but I want to welcome Sky back in for week number 2 of the fantasy football season. Sky, what's going on, man?
Happy to be back. Exciting to have football back. We got a week under our belt. A lot of interesting things. Unfortunately, a couple injuries, but a lot to digest and get ready for week 2.
Well, let's start there now. Give us some of the major injuries that have affected this week and some of the guys that will now jump into some new roles for week 2.
Well, of course, you got to start with Raheem Mostert, unfortunately. A lot of people had him as a breakout candidate for the 49ers. Should have had a big day against the Lions. He had just 2 carries, but 10 yards per carry. He was off to a big day, got hurt, was going to be 6 weeks, ended up being full season. Trey Sermon, the rookie third-round pick, was a healthy scratch. I expect him to get work this week. Elijah Mitchell, big day, over 100 yards and a touchdown. They should be just fine there. And then on the quarterback side, Ryan Fitzpatrick goes down for the Washington football team, and Taylor Heineke getting another opportunity. Should have beat Brady and the Buccaneers last year in the playoffs. They didn't get it. The rest is history, but Heineke might be able to get the football team over the hump, but totally different quarterback from Ryan Fitzpatrick.
All right, so let's get into the game tonight. You mentioned Tyler Heineke. You got the Giants and the Washington football team. If there's people out there tonight that are wondering, what does Tyler Heineke mean for the other players fantasy-wise?
Well, he's not going to be throwing the ball down the field as often. Last year in the playoffs, right, he didn't target Terry McLaurin as often as Ryan Fitzpatrick would, and Logan Thomas either. Logan Thomas just 3 targets, in week 1. I expect that to spike because Fitzpatrick doesn't usually target his tight ends as much. So Logan Thomas is a great streaming tight end there for fantasy. And then on the other side, J.D. McKissick and Antonio Gibson will be used more in the passing game as well as they were last year with Alex Smith. Terry McLaurin is an auto start. For the Giants side, quickly, I'll jump over there. I'm still hesitant on Saquon. I came on last week, and I said that if you could avoid Saquon Barkley somehow in fantasy football, I would do that. Those of you that were able to were, I'm sure, happy that you did. And I do want to just kind of sit him until he's 100%. He will be great eventually, but not quite yet. And the Washington football team is a great front. And Kenny Golladay, the big acquisition from the Lions coming over, didn't quite get it done either. Worried about Daniel Jones against this front. The Lions' offensive line, 31st in adjusted line yards per Pro Football Outsiders in week 1. Washington football defense of line, absolutely dominant. I'm worried about the Giants overall in this one.
All right. Obviously, we got a bunch of other things I want to ask you about as we get into week number 2. Jameis Winston, 5 touchdowns, but he only threw the ball 20 times. So what's your advice?
Yeah, 148 yards. Probably the most strange stat I've ever seen at the quarterback position. Obviously, they held it down, but Alvin Kamara will get his work. I'm expecting him to have a bigger load this week. It just happened to work out. The Packers didn't show up clearly, and I think the Saints are able to take it to the Panthers for a divisional game this week. Christian McCaffrey, of course, is going to keep it close. I'm expecting another big day from Jameis, but a similarly big game from Alvin Kamara and a couple of scores.
Yeah, that was a big interesting one because on the flip side, let's go to Aaron Rodgers. Did that one scare you off as a Rodger owner at all?
You know, it was definitely eye-opening, but knowing Aaron Rodgers, knowing what this summer has been, and I've covered it a lot on my show, it's been a disaster, as most people know. I just think that they overlooked New Orleans. It was a mutual field, right? They played in Jacksonville, actually, not in New Orleans because of the hurricane recently. So I think there's a huge bounce back for Rodgers, Adams, Aaron Jones, Robert Tonyan against the Lions, who just got beat up by the 49ers, who lost their top running back, used 2 quarterbacks. Brandon Ayuk barely played, and their top rookie was a healthy scratch. They pulled most of their defenders in the fourth quarter after Jason Verrett went down with an ACL tear of the 49ers. I expect the Packers to run the Lions here at home, Monday Night Football, in prime time. I'm not worried at all. If you can trade for Rodgers, Adams, or Jones, I'm absolutely throwing some lines out to see if I can get them on the cheap.
All right. There was other interesting storylines. You mentioned Deebo Samuel was a guy who just had a monster week last week. I mean, is that something? Is this a big year for him? Do you now anticipate as he? Because a lot of people liked IU coming into the year.
Yeah, and I'm one of them. I'm a 49er fan. I'm a Bay Area guy, and I watch the 49ers very closely. I was surprised that it was this much work. Now, I do want people to understand more than half of his yardage came on one busted coverage. Jimmy Garoppolo threw up. Honestly, should have been intercepted, in my opinion. He caught it, ran for the touchdown, so it looks a lot better than it was. If Brandon Ayuk is going to have limited work, which he did, and miss the entire first quarter, I don't expect Trent Sherfield to outpace Deebo Samuel, and of course there's George Kittle there. So do I expect him to have a big year? Yeah, absolutely. If he can finally stay healthy, which he hasn't been able to do. Do I expect weekly performances like this with 46% target share? Absolutely not. I would cut his numbers in half, and that's probably the standard with, of course, a couple of big games with upside.
Sky Guasco, Candlestick Kids podcast, the fantasy football podcast on the Believe Podcast Network. We're going to get the listener questions. We got a ton of them this week, so I promise that we'll get more this week than we did last week. But one more for you, because I'm intrigued by what you think. What are you telling Zeke Elliott owners?
I'm telling Zeke Elliott owners to not sell him. And if you're going to sell him, make sure you sell him at an appropriate price. If you're worried about it, he's going to be just fine. What's worrisome about Zeke is that he had 30 yards last week. What people don't understand, because you don't look at this kind of stuff in fantasy football, he was on the field for 83% of the snaps. What that tells me is that it wasn't that they weren't using him or that he wasn't effective. They had to throw the ball early and often because Brady got out to a lead and Dak had to do his thing throwing the ball. Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb, 16 and 15 targets each, respectively. Hold on to Zeke. If you're looking to acquire Zeke, don't be surprised if you have to pay a first round premium still, because he's still going to be Zeke. I would, though, go scoop Tony Pollard, his backup, off of waivers just in case. But Zeke Elliott's going to be just fine. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers have the best defensive line against the run in the NFL. I'm not surprised that game happened.
Okay, so last week you told the listeners to make sure they include the scoring. We'll see how many people listened. I don't know that everybody did, but we'll see. All right, this is from FedEx Tony in Williamstown. For a flex, Claypool from the Steelers, Davis from the Jets, or Cooks from Houston?
I think I'm going to ride the Corey Davis train here. Played very well. Obviously, going up against the Patriots is going to be tough, but they do not have Stephon Gilmore. He's on IR. That's huge. So I'm going to this connection between Zach Wilson and Corey Davis we saw in the preseason is no joke. Jamison Crowder out with COVID. I'm going to ride the Corey Davis train here. 2 touchdowns last week.
All right, let's get another question for you here. As let's go to Gerber in Dover, flex spot PPR. All right, throw the PPR in there. He needs one. Mike Davis, James Robinson, or Corey Davis?
Again, I think I'm going to go Corey Davis. James Robinson was really disturbing last week, and it's not him. He's incredibly talented. Urban Meyer cannot get away from, quote-unquote, his guys in Carlos Hyde. James Robinson is supremely more talented than Carlos Hyde at this point, but James Robinson didn't get the work last week. They're not going up against Houston. I think that's going to be tough. And Mike Davis, I mean, he did okay, but I'm worried about this Falcons offense in general. And again, he goes up against the Buccaneers that just shut down Zeke Elliott. There's no way I'm playing Mike Davis there. Again, I'm going to ride with Corey Davis.
All right, so another Corey Davis. All right, let's go to a 0.5 PPR. Mike Williams, Chargers. Elijah Mitchell, 49ers, flex.
Ooh, this one's tough. So Elijah Mitchell, again, came out last week, 6th-round rookie, ladies and gentlemen. He got an opportunity because Sermon was a scratch and Mostert got hurt. I do not expect big games like this every single week. Going up against the Eagles, who did a decent job against Mike Davis last week. It has a nice over-under at 50. I like that for a lot of scores. Or Mike Williams, again, 2 touchdowns last week. When he's healthy, you play him going up against the Cowboys, who got ripped up by Godwin and AB. I'm actually going to go against my guy here in Elijah Mitchell. I'm going to go with Mike Williams. While he's healthy, I'm going with him. I expect a big game out of Herbert.
All right, here we go. Let's go to a PPR running back, Kareem Hunt or Jamal Williams, PPR.
Oh, I like this. These are 2 backups here. Jamal Williams going up against the Packers and Kareem Hunt going up against the Texans. This one's going to be ugly against the Texans. I know the Texans got the upset, if you want to call it that, against the Jaguars last week, but Nick Chubb is going to dominate the first half. They're probably going to pull him, and it's going to be all Kareem Hunt's second half. I love Jamal Williams, but I think the Packers step it up mightily next week. And again, Alvin Kamara got his numbers, but the Packers did have the third best ranked defensive line last week, according to Pro Football Focus. So surprisingly, I'm actually going to go with Kareem Hunt here in mop-up duty in garbage time in the second half.
All right, let's get this one up for you here. This one's from James. Jamar Chase or Devonta Smith, couple first-round picks, 1 point PPR. Thank you, James.
Man, I love this one. And thank you, everybody, for giving me the specs. It really does help. The Bears got tore up last week from Matt Stafford and Cooper Kupp specifically out of the slot. Tyler Boyd usually plays the slot for the Bengals, but he wasn't used as much last week as I thought he would be. Jamar Chase came out, has that connection, obviously, with Joe Burrow going up against the Bears, who didn't play very well, and the 49ers should pick it up. This one is a tough one, but I think I'm going to ride with Devonta Smith because he is the number one. Jamar Chase might become that number one. T. Higgins sat out all the fourth quarter and overtime with an IV issue there with some cramping. So Chase got some more opportunity, but early in the season, I'm going to ride with Smith here. He's the number one, and Jalen Hurts looked great.
All right, here we go. Let's see another interesting one here. A lot of people have some tough ones. This one here is from a person who is in Newark, Delaware, who is listening. I'm on the road, so my screen is a little slow making the changes here. I apologize for that. So
no
let
problem.
me see if I can get this off my email here. This one had a bunch of different things in it here. All right, let's see. I know Chase was in there. Let's see if my email is not loading, of course, right why. Oh, here we go. Need to play two. Jamar Chase, Devonta Smith, Justin Jefferson, and Jalen Waddle. So that's all of the first-round picks from this year and last year.
Yikes. Yeah, first of all, these four guys on your team is pretty incredible, so well done. 2 LSU Tigers, 2 Bama Crimson Tide. I love that. I'm going to go off the bat here. I'm going to take the starters. Again, Justin Jefferson's guaranteed. And then I'm going to go with Devonta Smith as well. Jalen Waddle had a touchdown. Chase had a touchdown. All the rookie receivers held it down. But I gotta stick with Jamar Jefferson going up against the Cardinals, who should have had a second touchdown last week, and Dalvin Cook ended up running in from the 1 yard line. So I like Jefferson a lot. And then again, I'm going to stick with Devonta Smith going up against the 49ers.
All right, this is a PPR flex. Need one: Gaskin, Boyd, Marvin Williams Jr.
Yeah, I would go Gaskin here, but I'm actually going to fade him going up against the Bills. Najee Harris had a nice debut, but the Bills' defense is quite good. Let's see who else we have here. Tyler Boyd and Marvin Jones. Marvin Jones going up against the Broncos, very good secondary. And then Tyler Boyd, we mentioned earlier. Let's see, I got to get my... Oh, there we go. The Bears, right? Against the slot. Again, that's the Cooper Kupp slot. I think I'm going to go with Tyler Boyd. Maybe an unpopular pick, but I expect Tyler Boyd to bounce back this week in the slot where Cooper Kupp went for a deep touchdown and over 100 yards.
Now, here's one. This one is from Mike in Egg Harbor Township. He wants Lamar Jackson or Jameis Winston.
Wow.
Now, this one is a big play yardage big bonus yardage at 250, 300, 350. He says, need a win, Sky.
All right. Well, so if you get the bonuses there, this might be wild when you think about fantasy football. If you get the bonuses in passing specifically, I think I'm going to actually go with Jameis Winston here. Lamar Jackson, of course, gives you – now this is tough. I don't think we have time to get the answer from him, but I assume that's just passing yards. If it were total yards and you get the rushing as well, then it's probably Lamar Jackson. If it's strictly passing yards, I'm going to stick with Jameis Winston here. Again, I think there's a big game with the Panthers in division, played really well. I know we only had 150 last week, but we know Jameis can go for 400 at any time. I expect that to happen. And the Ravens, Lamar Jackson looks shaky down the stretch there against the Raiders on Monday night. So I'm going to go with Jameis. If it's passing total, you can still go with Lamar Jackson.
All right, I got about a minute or so left, so I'm going to give the floor to you. A couple waiver wires, sleepers, some players that you like in week number 2. Sky Guasco, Candlestick Kids Fantasy Football Podcast. Go.
I like it. Again, if you have the opportunity to go get any of those studs that underperformed, Calvin Ridley, Zeke Elliott, Devontae Adams, Aaron Jones, go get them now because the window is going to close immediately. Again, I do like having Darnell Mooney going up against the Bengals. He had a ton of targets last week. Allen Robinson had 11, but only 35 yards. Darnell Mooney is a guy that they want to get involved. I really like a bounce back here from Terry McLaurin as well against the Giants tonight if you're doing that. And then again, if you're going up against the Steelers here, or excuse me, the Raiders, the Steelers, all three wide receivers, I think, are a good play against the Raiders. The Ravens just don't have that in their arsenal, and that backfired on them last week. And then the Buccaneers, look, if AB is still, he's not around on waivers, but if you can still get him in a trade or so, I would do that. He's the real deal. And then, again, Mike Williams is somebody that might even still be on waivers. He was 65% managed last week. That has changed this week. But if he's still out there, Mike Williams for the Chargers, going up against the Cowboys, going to be a shootout, I would go and check him out as well. And then finally, again, Jamal Williams, we mentioned him earlier, but all these backup running backs, stash those guys if you have an extra spot on your roster. I like him a lot. And Rondale Moore going up against the Vikings there for the Cardinals. We know that A.J. Green is going to get targets, but he didn't look especially good. Christian Kirk with 2 touchdowns, but Rondale Moore could be that guy as well.
All right, Sky Guasco, the Candlestick Kids podcast, fantasy football. He'll be back next week. Sky, great job, man.
Appreciate you guys. Good luck.
And the fantasy football segment is brought to you by the Piccalilli Inn, Route 206 in Chemung, your best pick for South Jersey's best wings.